Good morning, this is Terry from Fabric Junction in Sturgis, South Dakota, and today I'm going to show you how to work with a 1-yard panel. And as you can see, I have a cute panel with a Santa Claus on it. It measures 36 by 44 when I bought it. I will trim it for this particular pattern. So what I will be showing you today is actually how to put the pinwheels together and all your little borders. Here is the design that we're working on. We will also have available for you all the cutting instructions and your fabric yardage will be posted on our website. So with that, we'll get started on our pinwheels, and you will cut strips that are 3 7/8 inch wide. You'll need 3 of them. You'll cut those then into 3 by 7/8 inch squares, and you'll need 28 because you're going to make 14 pinwheels, 7 for the bottom and 7 for the top. To do the pinwheels, I use my seam marking tool, and on this particular one, since the color is so dark, my pencil wouldn't show up, so I got my white pencil, placed my mark, draw it on both sides, and I draw basically from the middle out, and I do both sides of my marker, and then I'm ready to sew. With right sides together, we're going to stitch on our line, get it lined up and stitch. And I do continuous sewing every chance I get, and this is a good time to do that. So if I was doing all 28 squares, I would just keep going until I had one side done. Once that was done, I just roll it around, and now I'm going to stitch the other side. There we go. Strings and strings and more strings on this one. Okay. I cut them apart. Grab my straight edge. And now I want to cut in between those lines, so I line up on the point to point and cut. I go through my whole stack and do the same thing. Press. In this case, I'm going to press them all to the darker. Press. Now I need to cut off my dog ears. Get rid of the extra strings. Now I lay it out in a pinwheel fashion, and most of the time I'll have a whole stack. Oh, I missed a little section. So I would have a stack in each one of these. I get my pinwheel laid out and I go, okay, it looks correct. So then I start with the one on the right, I fold it to the left, I line up the seam allowance here, and I can feel it when it's butted up together, and I sew from the top down. ¼ inch. Oh, something I keep stepping on. 1/4 inch. And again, the right over left. Get rid of the string. Line those up. And this time I know I did a turn because I want those. Let me go back again to make sure that I have my pinwheel the right way. Inward, inward, there we go. Right over left, because I want to sew from this point this time down. Nope. Still have long streams all over. There we go. Okay, I don't separate the two. I want them to stay together because that'll show me where my pinwheel is. If I did it right, it still should look like a pinwheel. Now I can fold these over. I grab my two pieces. I line up all of that seam allowance, both of those. I line them right on top of each other. I push the top one to my left, the bottom one to my right, and that's the way I want to feed it into the machine. Because then the feed dogs will pull the bottom one, the top will push the top one, of course, and when it does it, it'll keep those two butted up against each other. Should have grabbed my gizmo to do my cutting this morning. Okay, once I have those, open it up. I should match. I press. And now I'm ready to sew all my pinwheels to each other. So, for time, I've already done that. So I have a row of pinwheels that are sewn to each other, and I'm adding my strips. Now you will have cut several 2.5 inch strips, and this one is a 4.5. You would have cut two 4.5 inch strips. What you do, once you have your pinwheels put together, get your tape measure out and measure through the center of your pinwheels. And mine is 42.5 inches. Yours will be very similar. It could be 42.5 exact, it could be a hair more or a hair less. Whatever is your measurement, that's what I want you to cut your strips. I have one of my strips already trimmed to match my pinwheel row. And what I do when I add the strips, I find center of my pinwheels, and I slip a pin in, and center of my strip, and I put a pin also in it. I line those two up, pin them together, and now I'm ready to sew. I've got so much bobbin here. There we go. And all these lovely strings. Okay. Match up the top. And I just line it up kind of as I go a little bit, so I get started. After I get started, I check to see where I am here, and sometimes one is just a hair longer than the other or a hair tighter. When you're doing this much piecing, sometimes it can be the tighter section. That's the reason I measure through the middle. It could be the stretchier side. Hard to say, but this way I know the two pieces are going to go to each other without making the quilt grow or shrink. I want it to stay at that 42.5 inches. Hold the pin. I try not to sew over them when I can. There's my halfway. I line up here, and this time I've got to ease just a little bit. Feed dogs are feeding a little bit fast. But like I said, this will keep it at my 42.5 inches. I get it sewn together, and then I press. And in this case, because the pinwheels create so much bulk, I press away from the pinwheels. I find my center because now I'm ready to add it onto my panel. Okay, when I started with my panel, since now I know my distance across here is 42.5 inches, I trimmed my panel down to 42.5. I left the 36 because I wanted the length, but I had to trim to match up with my pinwheels and my strips. And so my panel has been trimmed from the sides. You can see I still have a little bit of white from the other, and that's okay because that'll be hidden in my seam allowance. I need to find my center. So I find the center there. I find my center here. It still should be about right. Whoops, there. This one I'm just going to hang onto with my thumb. Match them up, pin it, and now I'm ready to attach the rest of my strips to my panel. Pin. Line up my edge again, and then just keep the two pieces lined up. These two line up a little nicer because they've not been pieced in between. And then again, go to the ironing board and press. And this one, it's up to you which direction you want to press. But in this particular case, since I had the one going down, I pressed the other one down also. Once you have it pressed, now you're ready to add your borders. So I have my borders cut. The inner one is 2.5. All my light pieces on this one were 2.5. On the tan, it was 2.5. What I want you to do now is you will add your borders. Sew your borders end to end. And you can do whatever method you like. On this one I just sewed them straight across. You can sew them, let me see, this way if you so choose. That's up to you. Either technique works. Once I have them end to end, both my inner and my outer borders, I go back and I measure my quilt right through the center. I just like measuring through the center because that way I know the quilt has not shifted. So I would come and I measure right through the center, and that's what you'll cut for your sides. Now the reason I'm not telling you a specific length on this particular part is because your panel, you may have trimmed it just a smidgen so that it's not a full 36-inch panel. Maybe you decided to add one more piece, make these a little bigger, make them a little smaller. That's up to you. This style of layout is very versatile that you will be able to adjust. So take your border, cut it the length of the center, do your left and your right, your sides. Get your sides done. Press them. Once those are pressed, measure across the other direction. This will give you your top and your bottom border. Once you have those on, repeat that for your outer border. Measure through the middle again. That'll be your left and your right side of on the outer border. Press it. Measure this. That will give your top and your bottom. Then you will have this beautiful quilt done with a 1-yard panel that you were wondering, what am I going to do with? Here's the one I showed you. I also have one to show you how versatile it is that I put together. I did not want it as large as this because it goes to a child. But once again, and this one hasn't been quilted yet. My quilters will be working on it shortly. It's been sent down to quilting, but I wanted to show it to you to show you how versatile you can make this once you have your pinwheels. This one here is done with a 1-yard Olaf panel. And like I said, it goes to a small child, so I didn't want it near as big. But I still put the pinwheels in. I did put in a narrow one here. This is 1.5 inches. And that's what I did to elongate. And then I just put a 4.5-inch border, or 5. I might have stayed with the 5.5. But this one here, just to create a little bit of something and another way to use this particular layout on a 1-yard panel. And the tools I used, as a reminder, was my seam marker, my white pencil, my gripper, the cutter, all the wonderful tools that we keep on hand. Thank you for watching us here at Fabric Junction. I hope you enjoy this video, and we'll dig out that 1-yard panel and create something beautiful with it. Thank you.